Welcome back, legends, to another Uncommon Man Project podcast. Today is for three kinds of people. One, the man who is thinking about having children, because it takes a lot of thinking. I highly recommend it. For the second guy, he is on the path. Maybe a child is on the way. And the third is to those guys who are already dads. We're going to be ripping out the things that you need to think about, the things that you need to be aware of, and some of the possible solutions to maybe some of the challenges that are going on. I am particularly excited about this podcast because I have two of the guys, one who's been through the process very recently, one who's been through the process quite a long time ago and is about to do it again because I'm not quite sure why yet. And it's great for me because I am currently, when I say I don't agree with this whole we are pregnant thing. My fiance is pregnant. I am not. I am literally observing it and continuing on my life as if nothing else has changed right now. So I'm really interested in getting some advice from these guys, and hopefully the questions and answers that come from this will be really helpful for you. So I'm actually going to start with Harry because I know his journey in this is really interesting, and I've spoken to him first, but I want to kind of dive back, not because I don't know how to make a baby, but the idea of like, what were your thought processes before Jackson turned up in yours and Liv's life? Like, what were you thinking about?
So after we got married, or even before we got married, like we were thinking about the timeline of how we wanted to do things. And the thing that we were kind of considering, well, the ideal situation was we would be in a house and be in a financial position where she could take as much time off as she wanted, at least 12 months or longer if need be, and finances wouldn't be a stress. And the beauty of this job is I can float in and out as I kind of please. So that wasn't an issue. But that was kind of what we ideally wanted to have in place. And then so when we got married, I just turned 30. Liv was, a couple of years older than me. And then we kind of did the math and then realized that, well, okay, it's probably going to be 3 to 5 years from now before we can get into a house at this current rate with interest rates, all that kind of stuff. Then firstborn puts us, mid to late 30s. Then the second pushing 40. And that extends things a fair bit. And then for those of you that have done your research or know, the later that you go on to have kids, the harder it can be for some people, and the risk of complications and all those kind of things goes up as well. And we wanted to be on the younger side of parents as well, because then at that stage, by the time our kids are 20, we're 60 as well. So everything kind of gets delayed that little bit further. And then, that was where we sat for a while, and eventually came to the point where, I'd rather start our family now. We'll figure out the finances, figure out everything else later. We can make it work, like we've done. I don't have my office anymore. Jax is in there, and we're figuring things out as we go.
All right, hang on. I won't go to stop you there because this is an interesting part. Like, people are like, I'm going to plan to have a kid. I'm going to do all these things, and it just sounds like 90% of the time people just throw the plan out the window. They just go, "Oh, whatever, shit, we'll figure it out." How did you have the confidence to be like, you know what, shit, we're here. Let's have a kid. And you, of course, went and started another business at the same time as well, which is a fantastic idea, I feel, as a, soon to be dad. Like, how did you get the confidence to be like, okay, cool, we're not in the financial situation, we're not in the house. These are the two biggest things we were thinking about in terms of having a kid. And now actually we're having a kid.
Well, worst case scenario, we have the child, can't afford the mortgage, sell the house, move back in with mum and dad 5 minutes up the road, and live with them. Like, that was probably worst case scenario. Mum and dad are pretty well.
Know that? Did mum and dad know that? Classic.
They might have forced us into the garage or the dog kennel or something like that, but they would have looked after Jax, like, at least. So that's fine. But as worst case scenario, it wasn't that bad. And a lot of shit would have to go against us for that to actually happen. So like the reality of us getting to that point was pretty slim. And I was happy to back our odds that we wouldn't get to that point, right? Even with the increase in interest rates and all that kind of stuff, I was happy that we'd be okay. We'd be able to figure it out. Between the coaching, between Primal, between everything else that we're doing, we're pretty resourceful. I backed us to be able to figure it out.
I like it. Nick, you had a bit of a different journey, bro. I believe you got a bit of a surprise, was it not?
It was a surprise. So I was still
Hang
in
on,
uni.
I want to know first, like, because you were
Yeah.
young, you were still in uni, right? Did you think you were going to be a dad later on in life? Like, was that a thought, like, oh, I'll be a dad at some stage of my life?
To be honest with you, I probably didn't have that mapped out there. I just I was more focused on getting a professional accreditation and essentially leaving the country and working abroad, having a really good career, and that was the focus. I wouldn't have particularly been happy if that were the case, and that did happen and transpire. Fortunately, it didn't, but that was the plan, and I couldn't see beyond that, and I couldn't see anything else in between that, to be really honest with you. Very vanilla. Very vanilla.
Okay. So fast forward, how did you find out? Like, what was that day like?
It was horrible.
Take you back for some trauma. Just take you back for some
It
trauma.
was absolutely horrible. I literally felt like my entire life was just ended in that instant. Not that I had everything like mapped out. Like clearly I was my own, own delusion. But it felt like a ton of bricks like hitting me and being like, holy shit, dude, because the first thing that came up into my mind was obviously my experience with having different masculine figures and not really having a father as I was growing up. Like, how the fuck am I supposed to do this if this is the case? Like, if I'm supposed to step in there, I didn't even have that. Like, where's the blueprint? The people that were there, they were like these kids throwing temper tantrums and running businesses and these affluent males spreading their seed everywhere. But it was just these guys just like they weren't paternal. They didn't guide, they didn't share, they didn't protect, they didn't do those things. And now I'm like, yeah, in the dark. I'm like, I've got to somehow figure this out. And then obviously the thoughts that pop up like, okay, well, are we keeping the baby? Is it sure? Am I sure that it is mine? You have all these little questions that really start playing in your mind. And you're like, well, what if this is the case? Or what if this is the case? What if she doesn't want to keep it? What if we do keep it? Like, what are all these alternative realities going to possibly look like? And then where do we fit in? And then how do I fit in the middle of all of that?
How long had you been with Karis at this stage?
I think it was maybe just over 2 years. So, I mean, it's really fresh. And that's not something that you're actively like aiming towards. But I suppose when you're an adult and doing such things, that's
technically you
part of the
are
part.
actively aiming for that. It's just the
You
outcome is slightly
actively are.
different. Yeah.
Different outcome.
Highly active, in fact. Yeah, probably the most active. So I'm going to circle back because this is really interesting. I want to go through each stage because I want to understand. Harry, you had a planned pregnancy, somewhat. What were you like? How did Liv, your wife, change in your eyes as you're going through the process of pregnancy? By the way, guys, Harry was not pregnant. Liv was.
Just for the record.
Just for the record.
Thank goodness.
How did she change in my eyes? It was interesting when she obviously started to show a lot of the signs of actually, the belly growing and like just physically changing and all that kind of stuff. And I actually found her a lot, like my attraction increased during that process, which was actually really interesting. And it's almost annoying because like there's this increased level of attraction from my end. She's feeling like a bloated cow and like, get the fuck off me. So, there's this mismatch in experiences or desires, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So, that was from the physical element, and then from, I guess, a psychological standpoint, through this entire process, one thing that I've tried to separate in my mind, if you call it that, is remove the label of mum from her. And that might seem a little bit confusing for some people, but my logic here is, from some of the research or the studies and the books that I've read in terms of, longer term relationships, parenthood, marriage, all that kind of stuff, is when you start to add like these labels to people, then it changes the way that you subconsciously feel and kind of act towards them. And so unless you're into incest, not many people are going to get off on the thought of like your mum, right? And so just the term mum, you think of like generally your own mum, but then in doing so, if you start to label, oh, this is mum, as to, who was your wife and this woman, then that sexual attraction kind of changes because subconsciously, well, that's a weird thing for a mum to do. You don't see a mum in that kind of light. As strange as that kind of might sound, and not to take anything away from her being like an amazing mum and all that kind of stuff, but I wanted to make sure that in my mind, she is Liv, the amazing woman that I see her as, that I've always loved her as, then a wife, and she's mother to Jackson, not to me, nothing to do with me in that sense. Right.
Man, I'm writing that down. Cue all the mum jokes, but like that is okay. That's key. Thank you for that little slice there. Nick, it's gonna be different from you, dude. You were in your early 20s. What were you, 20, 21?
Yeah. So
So
I think
you don't need to be
20.
pumping any test or anything to have a ridiculously high sex drive at that age. Let's be honest. So how did things change for you?
Mine was quite interesting. So I lost attraction for her completely during that time because of what she represented. Because in my mind, it was like, you are the person that is basically ending my life. I didn't want to take accountability. Yes.
Wow.
That was rough. We disliked each other a great deal. I would even say borderline hate each other because everything came up. Now you've got childhood trauma coming up. You've got everything. That catalyzed everything. That catalyzed my life right now, as it is right now. So that was when like there was literally like a bomb thrown in and then everything just blew up. So it wasn't a pretty time. So I didn't have a job then at all. During the pregnancy period, I was also jobless for like 5-6 months. We were staying at my mum's place. Look, the one thing we could agree on was like both of our sex drives were fantastic. So we didn't have a problem there. We hated each other, but we made sure that we met each other's needs during that period of time. So that's the one thing that kept our relationship, or whatever you call situationship, going. It really wasn't an easy time because it was just like, when you don't want to accept something and it's unexpected and your ego is in the way and it doesn't tie into your vision, it doesn't tie into what was possible, like you're unwilling to let go of the reality of what was for what is. And that I was so stubborn. And I honestly was an absolute dick. And then on top of it, I still got pregnancy hormones. So I'm very sensitive to when she's pregnant. Like even now, for example, like holy moly, mate, like it feels like I'm pregnant. So it like just having symptoms, experiencing baby brain, whatever the case is. So having that on top of that. And then because of everything coming up, there was also a couple of hospital stints. So I was still doing like I was doing a thesis or my second one. and like everything came up. So it expedited the path of like Crohn's that I was on. So I had celiacs and it was progressing. And that got me into the hospital because I didn't know how to deal with stress. My body was overloaded. I was a complete fight, freeze, fawn mode. And just from childhood to like that just pushed me over the limits. I was sick. I lost weight, started losing hair, no job. And then eventually I got a job, and then I carried on being sick whilst I was at the job. And then I was stressed about it, being at the job, but it was just a mess. Like it was absolute a mess. Like nothing great.
Okay. Before I jump into Harry, like, what were your expectations of when this kid was going to come? Like, you got 9 months, get your shit sorted. What's going on? You take a breath.
That was for you, Nick, wasn't it?
There it is.
Is it me?
Yeah,
Oh,
bro. I
for
want to
me.
know, like, you've got 9 months. It's like, what's going on?
For 9 months. It's like everything. Like I'm reliving all the moments of being like a kid and not having a father, to trying to figure that out. And then when you go into a survival state where you're like, shit, I don't have income to support this. Because it wasn't necessarily just a thing of me stepping in and stepping up. Like, I suppose it was an obligation as well. It's like, okay, like you have to do this. This is what a man does. Like, I stepped straight into that thing of like, okay, you've got to be a provider. That's going to be the life that you're going to be living. Like, I didn't know what our relationship was going to look like. I didn't know if we were going to be together. We even had discussed like co-parenting in between that. Like, it was just like, well, how does this work? Are we going to have a broken home? Are we going to work on ourselves? And we were kind of trying to do that. I didn't really have expectations other than a really difficult life and a big mess that I was trying to like not project onto my child, which still felt like a foreign entity. Because like you said earlier, Harry, it's like, and Josh, like, you're not the one that's pregnant. You're just there. And then it hits you when the baby pops. I was like, holy shit, I'm a dad. Now it's real. So yeah,
Low
I didn't know
expectations
what
is a
to
good place
expect.
to start. Low expectations. It's because Harry, like, you've got a different story. What were your expectations about having a kid? Like, what were the feelings you were having, or thought you were going to have? Like, what was everything that was what was the path you laid out in front of you?
Well, we kind of knew that we expected it to be hard. We expected, your sleep to be disturbed. We expected it to be stressful, things like that. Like, even, leading up to the birth, I started taking my epilepsy medication again, because then that was another risk for us, being stressed, being sleep deprived, all that kind of stuff. And, the last thing Liv needs, as well as a crying baby, is like a fitting husband as well. So it's not going to make her situation any easier. So started taking that stuff again. And, we knew that it was going to be hard. But what I had in my head was, people talk about, oh, it's hard, but it's worth it. You have this unconditional love for this child. You just see them, they come out, and just everything melts away and the world stops and nothing else before that ever mattered. And, all this shit that people talk about. And then he was born, and I'm just staring at this, well, still basically a fetus, just like, well, I guess it's mine. Like, I saw it come out of my wife. I trust her that she hasn't slept with anyone else. Like, I guess it's mine. Yeah, right. And then, there wasn't this instant bond. There wasn't this unconditional love or anything like that that people spoke about. And then, after the first few weeks, then he starts to go into baby mode, or still potato mode at that stage. He's crying, he's shitting, he's disturbing your sleep, he's doing all that kind of stuff. And there was still none of this unconditional love people spoke of. There wasn't any of that adornment that people spoke of. I've just got this thing that ruins my routine, I can't do things when I want to do them anymore. I can't sleep when I like to sleep because it fucks that up, and everything gets changed. And as selfish as it might sound, I'm not getting anything in return. It's not like you get a smile and you're like, oh, that was cool, or you get to go do something with them. Like, as selfish as it sounds, like our expectation that, you know, the stress and everything would be worth it because of that love was not only just not met, it was actually the exact opposite. So there was a huge mismatch in the expectation versus reality. And so it was really hard to not be resentful of this child, of this thing that has just changed my life. And now we were questioning, like, well, is there something wrong with us? Are we shit people because we don't love this baby instantly, because we don't have these feelings that everyone said you're supposed to feel, and all that kind of stuff? Like, even now we have no desire to have a second child anytime soon. Like, one is well enough for like what we've got now. And, you know, we don't resent him or anything now. Like, I do love him. Like, it's getting a lot more like exciting watching him develop and things like that. But it definitely wasn't this instant thing that people like spoke of, which was really confusing going through that experience. And so because I voiced that like half jokingly to you and James and some of the other guys, and no one else had voiced that before. Like, well, that's an interesting experience, bro. Like, no one else has ever either experienced or at least owned up to it. But you know, I have enough consciousness to know that, well, if I experienced it, surely somebody else has felt that way, maybe in varying degrees of how long it would last. But surely I'm not the only one that has looked at their child and thought, don't know if I'm cut out for this. Like, I don't know what that is. There's like just nothing there.
Okay, so how did that change things with you and Liv?
It became a juggling act of a lot of stuff, because at the start, you know, like for the first few weeks, I was still, you know, before I went back to work, I was still doing my thing. We're still going to the gym, doing all that kind of stuff, because at home, I'm just a spare dick. I can't really do a whole lot. I'm there for her support, but other than that, not much else. So other than that, I would still kind of carry about my routines to do something. And even in that, she told me that, you know, she had to try and control her resentment of me, because, you know, she's recovering, feeling like a cow, just having this thing suck the life out of her. And breastfeeding is not natural or easy for a lot of people. So, you know, she's in that pain and going through that. And I'm just going about my merry way, just coming and going and all that kind of stuff. And then as we've tried to juggle, both of us working, both of us trying to grow businesses, it became really easy just to fall into like roommates and just babysitting. You know, someone would be out, and that would be their equivalent of quiet time, whether that was the gym or working or whatever. And you come back and it's like, thank God you're home. Take the baby. I'm fucking off. I'm going to have quiet time. I'm going to do something else. Right. And it wasn't easy to maintain like our spark or our relationship, because we felt like just tag team babysitters essentially, which was really difficult, because then again, you feel like you're not progressing. It's not as exciting as people said it would be, and you're kind of just biding time. And then again, you've got people saying like, don't you just love the newborn phase? The fuck do you mean? It's a crying potato. What is there to love about it? And you're like, oh, just wait till he walks. And then he starts walking, and they're like, because you'll never be in the same place as you left him. I'm like, yeah, great. Then he can come on adventures. We can walk, we can play footy, we can go and do shit. He can talk to me. Like, why would you want to delay that? I'm like, fucking oath, I can't wait till he can walk, till he can talk, till he can do stuff. Sure, like he's got the energy of like 10 Energizer bunnies. So like I might regret that, but I would much prefer that than this little dude this little man that's trying to control his emotions because he's got so much energy pent up, but he doesn't have the motor skills to be able to, or the coordination to be able to walk or move in the way that he wants, so that he's constantly, just slower in everything. So he's almost walking. So I'm really excited for that phase.
So you're like BJJ running. We're going straight for it. He's just about walking.
Dude, he's got a weight vest. He's got leg weights. He's got like a little pull-up bar. He's got everything. This dude's going to be a savage before he's 10 years old. Like,
I think, and this is completely selfish. This is for me, but hopefully it helps somebody else. I got asked by a client the other day. They're like, he said, how important do you think it is to have things that you and your partner have together, common ground? And I'm like, well, I'm fearful of the other thing. I met Fleur chasing her down the mountain. She's probably one of the best female skiers. In fact, she's probably one of the best skiers I know. And she's just phenomenal. But then that leads her to school. She's just hardworking. She's driven. She'll go after any sport. Like, I like bikes. We bike ride together. Well, we used to. It's been about 3 years since a pile of injuries and miscarriage and all these sorts of things. But it hit me the other day. I'm like, fuck. When's the next time I'm going on a bike ride with Fleur? And it gives me goosebumps now because I'm like, holy shit. All our common ground, like every single one of the things that we've based our relationship on and all of our adventures. You can't take a kid while you're dropping a fucking massive line down a cliff. You can't take a kid doing 30k an hour on our road bikes. You can't take a kid kite surfing. I'm like, all of these things that we've built our relationship on, all of these common grounds, we all have one thing in common. Maybe the house is the second thing, but it's like, we've got a kid. Don't get me wrong. I'm forgetting about all our values and morals and everything like that. We have those in common. But that ain't that fun. I ain't going out excited about my morals and values. What have you done about common ground? Because as you said, it's like a babysitter swap. I'm out. I'm going to go do the gym that we used to do together. What have you done about that?
Yeah, and that part has been really hard because we used to work out together. We used to do a lot of that stuff together, which has been hard because of that tag team in babysitting. And, we were putting him in the creche for a little bit, but that literally lasted maybe 2 weeks. And then we realized that the creche is full of retards and sick kids, and they just stick him in front of this big TV. And I'm like, I'd really rather not. So we pulled him out of that. And now he'll start daycare in a few weeks, and we're making a conscious effort that one time each week is when we'll go to some CrossFit together. We're going to go train and start to bring that back in so that we have that child-free time. Soon enough, he'll be able to go to the creche there because I want him to be a part of our workouts. I want him to see us doing that kind of stuff so that that's normalized for him. But what we've had to swap it to, or the time is now involved with him. Like, we've had to just adapt things that we've done. We've either done workouts at home, just with a step-up box and a weight vest and stuff like that. In the mornings, we'll go for a walk and we'll sit in the sun, the three of us, and that's when we'll have, either our brain juice or our coffee, and we'll sit there and just enjoy that time. But, the things that we kind of used to do together, like working out, going out to restaurants, going to comedy shows and stuff like that, it's not impossible, but it just takes a lot more organization to kind of make it happen. And so if you've got grandparents or someone that can look after him, then that's cool. But again, it's harder to make that a weekly occurrence relying on those people. So we haven't found the perfect formula by any stretch of the imagination. But it is getting better. It is getting better. Like, we're just finding some of those little pillars within the day that we just have those little check-ins, those little times with each other of, hey, how you doing? I know she's quite stressed at the moment with her business and work and all that kind of stuff. So, I'm trying to find ways that I can shed some of that load so that she doesn't bring that home to Jax and to the family and stuff like that. So.
What about you, Nick? Like, you weren't so planned. You know, made the choice of having this kid. You had a great sex life, but I'm going to drop that question as well, because if your common ground's great sex, I don't know from both of you, what happens to that? I don't know. I got a pretty good healthy appetite. I'm totally honest with you. And I'm like, was that common ground gone as well? And for how long? And what happens? Fill me in. You're the expert here. You're going for 3.
So I think I'm going to have to answer this question a little bit from where I was to where I am, especially just adding on the commentary that Harry has there. You, like, fortunately, she has a high sex drive. Same for myself. I wouldn't say there was a loss of attraction, but there was definitely a loss of love in that space. So our relationship took on a completely different dynamic. But coming back to principles and values, and more importantly, being the best parents that we could be, as much as we were in these spaces, it got us to question and really start looking at what we considered normal. So at that moment, the agreement was, I want you to be at home, and she wanted to be at home and look after our child. So that meant that she would obviously be sacrificing income to a degree for a period of time, because of just all the stats that were behind, taking your kid to daycare too early, allowing them to like be out of the nest, like what it does to their nervous system, what it does to just your relationship. You don't necessarily have as much control of the environment, and just the entire, like, if you're looking at building a human after they're being born, like just subconsciously and consciously, like we wanted to be more in control of that. Unfortunately, there were still a lot of triggers and things that we were dealing with during that time. So it wasn't ideal, but I made the conscious effort. And it's interesting that you had the experience of like, you're not sure like how to connect. That was the only thing in my life that I could connect to, was my son. That was it. Complete opposite. That is the only space in my life where I could feel. I didn't have any disconnections. I stonewalled everyone else and everything else, but that there was my lifeline. And just the fact that he was there, and I had to look at this human being and say, like, I've got to make a commitment to not just myself, but to you, that I'm going to be the best version of myself. I don't know what's going to happen between me and mom, but I promise I'm not going to fuck you up to the same degree in which I was fucked up. Like that was my commitment there. Like, and I'm going to give you a better life, and I'm going to question and turn everything over as I can. And it was the switch that went off, that was like, fuck, mate, like, I don't know, but I'm going to start clawing at walls and at principles and at ideas and at everything. And that's really where my inward journey as a human really started, like really questioning everything. So it was, he essentially catalyzed that, which was really interesting. Like I wouldn't be where I am or be the person that I am without that. And does he have some of my worst traits? Oh, he does right now. Like, he does. And I have to look at that and be like, cool. That's part of the cleanup that I've got to do because of the man that I was then. I'd even say boy. I wasn't a man then. I didn't understand the shit. Fast forward to where we are now. It's when you're looking for connection, because we can agree that there was no connection back then, but now it's a thing of, my role is to nurture, to support as much as I physically can around the space, to make like her life as easy as possible. The agreement is still there. It still holds. Does she do some business stuff from occasion? Yes. For nearly the last year, she hasn't worked. Because I said, like, again, kids take precedence. I don't want to be 20 years down the line And I've got kids that feel like, oh, we were just shipped out at an early stage. We feel disconnected. You weren't there. You weren't present. You just dismissed us. Yes, business was great, but like, I'm not going to die with the business as my last thought. Like, I'm going to be like, wow, how was I as a father? And my role has changed in terms of, well, yes, I am provider. And yes, I recognize maybe I am wearing a lot of hats that a lot of men wouldn't maybe juggle it as well as I'm doing right now. So helping out with cleaning, supporting kids, like this morning, doing the tapping with my kids to help them reprogram and build them up to like making my partner a cup of tea, like those, like you talked about, like looking for those things that you connected to. Karis and I have died individually so many times as people that I can look at her right now and I'm okay with waking up and her being completely different to how she was yesterday to who she is today. And she's the same with that for me, because we know each other. We know that we see things differently, but we know that our choices, our values, and whatever else, like the bigger picture, like that's aligned, and the way that we feel about each other, even though that's an active engagement. It's like this morning, I wrote her a note, made her a cup of tea. She didn't ask me for that. And I'm not saying that for a thing of like, oh, like, look at me. It's a thing of, I took the time to say, look, what can I do to be a better partner, also represent a good man and a good father? It takes me 2 minutes to do that. There was thought there. There's connection there. Have I seen her the rest of the morning? No, I haven't. I've been in the office. I've been here. But she knows, oh, wow, you thought of me. You sorted out the kids. You allowed me to sleep longer because later I'm going to make like maybe a big breakfast or a smoothie or do something that I know that you need. And so we start balancing the workload. And it's not that we have to necessarily communicate it all the time. And it's not, I expect you to do that. I want to do that because I'm making a commitment with you to build a life. And right now, at one point in time, going back, Noah, well, my eldest, he was in between us. So he was like the center. So I if I were to build a diagram, you'd have like 2 circles and you'd have the circle in the middle and everything's like enmeshed. That was what our relationship looked like. And before that, we were enmeshed. So we kind of like balanced each other out. But there was a point in time where when we did enough work that we had to realize we are 2 individuals making a choice to be with one another, to build a life together, and do things with one another. And maybe it's taken on a different role versus drinking and going to the gym and going to parties and doing things like that. But what I do actively engage in is, hey, let's have a chat, like in the morning, like I'll open up half an hour and we just have a cup of coffee and we chat. Maybe you talk about a couple of things that's got nothing to do with what we have to do as parents, what we have to do like maybe in the business or things we have to pay. It's just, how are you doing? Like, how are you feeling? What are you working on? Like, what's coming up for you? Like, just sharing that vulnerability and that intimacy. And what's helped with that is like doing a spontaneous coffee date or trying out a different restaurant once in a while. Fortunately, the way we've designed our lives, and unfortunately, I don't have grandparents here. I don't have a support system. We parenting full time, running a business, we parenting. Right now, we also clean the house. We don't have any help there. And we dealt with a couple of massive health scares in between and miscarriages, which we had to work through physically so that this could be a viable pregnancy. So in between that, you have all these things, but it doesn't help when you look at it and you say, well, this is really heavy. It helps when you look at everything and you say, I trust and I know that I've got capacity for all of these things. And it's on my lap because I can manage it. I'm being grateful for it.
That's been really helpful because you made me want to be a better husband right there, which is great. Just brought up some simple little things. But the other thing is you've brought up, and I know there'll be men out there going through it, but the miscarriage aspect, like we had a miscarriage, and it was an interesting time. But for me as a male, nothing had changed because, as Harry said earlier, like, oh, kids in my life, like this is this thing now. But up until that point, it's like, fuck, nothing's changed. My body's not changing. I've got no hormones. Nothing's going on. Like, how did you help Paris, and how did it actually? What did you feel first when the miscarriage happened?
Well, we had 2
Yeah.
in 3 months. Yeah. So it was, I think it was like 12 weeks. And another one was like 11 weeks, somewhere in there. And what the miscarriage highlighted initially was like, well, it just got us to, like, it rocked everything, even though it might not have hit me directly because you don't see it as a viable thing. But seeing my partner in that space and what it brought up for her that we had to both look at together, that rocked me, because that rocked the foundation of our relationship. Because the space that she went in, she went, like, if I were to maybe try and express it, she went into like this cave within herself to make sense of it. Because I think as a woman, from what I witnessed, you question, like, well, why would this be the case if this hasn't happened before? Is there something that I did wrong? Was it that we weren't ready? Is this just divine timing? Is it, you possibly try to blame yourself, but in her case, it genuinely was her body couldn't handle it because she was anemic. So just to give you an idea, her iron was 2. An average person's iron is between, 50 and 70 minimum. It was 2. Like, she was in organ failure. And
How she
so
managed to develop a kid for like 12 weeks is just insane. Women are insane.
So I didn't necessarily feel the loss of the kid yet. The second one, however, I invested in that one. I was like, I'm actually really excited. Like this, I'm like, we're ready. I know we're ready. Financially, we're ready. We're going for this. Like, great. And that, I had a picture in my head. And that fucked me up. Like, I don't have any other words. Like, I really, like, I bet on it. I had the horse. I betted on it. I was there. I was all in. And it was that crumbling of that vision with assumption and expectation. And you're just sitting there and you're like, wow. Like, I literally went like 2 days before, and I went and I bought like some clothes and things. And then you sit there and you're just like, fuck, is this ever going to happen? And then you've got a partner that's, both of them happened at home. One of them happened and it was everywhere. So it wasn't like, oh, go to the hospital. No, I saw it. I was there. It wasn't, she did it on her own. I came back, oh, I just had a miscarriage. No, I was there. I watched it. I saw the whole thing. I saw her hold a fetus in her hand, or a little being. So it wasn't just a thing of the woman's dealing with it. No, but I was there. And you sit there and you're like, fuck. I wouldn't have necessarily understood the implication of what that was, or what that experience was, unless I stood there and I was in that space with that person. And fuck, like, I can't imagine having to be the person holding that, just being on the outside there, holding space with the person. Fuck.
Yeah, so that's what I want to kind of share, because there'll be guys listening that'll be like, fuck do I do? Like, it's one of the times in our lives that there is no doing. There is no problem to solve. You are fucked as a man. Your doughy attitude and your masculine of like, I can fix this. You can't. And the impact that has on the guy, and I watch so many relationships break because of a miscarriage, when I'm like, no, this should bond, not break. This should be the thing that brings you guys closer, because often the man doesn't have the strength or capacity to understand that, yes, there is nothing you can do. Like, you cannot fix this. You are not going to put a fence back together here, but you can provide that space. what would you recommend, or what suggestions can you give to guys experiencing this?
Okay, firstly, you have no fucking idea what that person's going through. Number one. So you're shooting in the dark. So any assumption that you make, any strategy, any fixer-upper, not going to work. It's also not going to be received. Number two, there is, just from a logical standpoint, there's hormones. There's a huge flux. There's a huge dip in mental, emotional, physical well-being. It is so erratic. Okay? Plus, it's basically like you're hemorrhaging at the same time. There's a lot. Number three, it's technically a loss of life. There's grief. You having any expectation on, oh, like, it's been like 2 weeks. Why aren't you cooking? Or why aren't you helping around the house? Or why are you just lying there eating ice cream? Or
Or
why don't
why
you
are
want
we
to
not
have
being intimate again?
Yeah, all that. Like scratch that. If you are there for the right reasons, you are going to be present and be like, I'm here with you. I might not understand. I might not be able to vocalize, but don't just ask what to do, because that's another task for her. Just show up, cook the meal, clean the house, write the note, give her a massage if you can. Like the things where you're showing affection and compassion. If she is just crying and look, just go sit there. Don't just sit and vegetate and watch TV or sit scrolling on the phone. Be there, be present. And she might not be able to vocalize what she needs. If you know her well enough, you'll be able to meet at least some of those needs, or she can at least see, wow, you're there. You're actually there. If you can, and she's open and receptive, look for like supplementation and things just to help her system rebalance as well. That's a practical step. Iron, like organic liver tablets, those type of things, that's going to help a lot with the blood loss and just getting the body to bounce back. But there's going to be emotional baggage even when the body bounces back. And even when she says she's okay, she's going to have moments where she's not going to be. And it will be unexplained. Grief is something that you just need to sit in, and it will be processed in your system innately. You cannot rush it. There's no fix. There's no specific path. There might be a need for conversations. There's no like, oh, it's been 3 months. Now get done. Now you're done. It doesn't work like that. And catch yourself when you're wanting to assume any one of those things, because it's gonna make it feel really shitty for you being in that relationship, and because you're gonna feel like, oh, my needs aren't met. But again, mate, like you chose this person, even if you're not married, for better or for worse. And if you were in your like in the shitter, this person would be there caring for you and not showing any resentment or having expectation on you. That person would be there. So the opposite should also be true.
Yeah. I don't know why it is so hard for us guys sometimes. One of the things that was really interesting when we went through this process was people would come over and they would assume how you were feeling. And that assumption actually made me feel really guilty, because they would come over and they'd be like, so sorry, you must be feeling awful, that X, Y, Z. And I was like, man, should I be feeling that way? Because I'll be honest, like I didn't feel anything. When we lost our first one, I was like, and then everybody's like, you should be feeling like, are you feeling this way, feeling this way? And I'm just like, man, now I feel guilty because I'm not feeling that way. If I was feeling that way, would that help Fleur more? And all these things. And I learned very quickly, this is great. I was like, Fleur, how are you feeling? It was that simple. And it wasn't like, oh, Fleur, you must be feeling exhausted. Oh, Fleur, you must be feeling so sad. It was like, Fleur, how are you feeling in this moment?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do to help? Sometimes it depends on what she answered. I'm feeling super sad. Cool. I knew what that meant. Just sit beside her. That was easy. I'm feeling hungry. Oh, that was easy too. But it's like there's some of these emotions where you don't know what to do. And sometimes it's just accepting that that's how they feel. There's nothing you can do. I thought that was really interesting, going through that process, that people were all just like, here's how you feel. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel like that. And then I felt terrible for not feeling like that. I'm like, far out. Does Fleur feel that way as well? And then the woman goes through the whole process, is it my fault? Am I broken? Am I a terrible person? Oh, man. And the list just goes on for them. And I'm like, and my brain's going, how can you even think that? What are you, an idiot? Like, how is this your, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they are thinking it. The legitimacy of their thoughts doesn't take away. So that was one thing I was blown away with going through that journey. It was bizarre thing. Kind of got. I think that one of the scariest things that we're always told as men, I was like, cool, what's birth like? And they're like, the common quote is, it's like watching your favorite pub burn down. And I'm like, brilliant. Okay, so what I have noticed about pregnancy is there's all these preconceived things. It's going to be extremely painful. It's going to be torturous. You're going to lose, there's going to be no sex for you. It is all these things. And us three are very similar in our terms of you create the life you want. And people will be like you, Josh, it's going to be what it's going to be. It's going to be your favorite pub burning down and all this stuff. Yet, when I meet some people and they're like, yeah, phenomenal birth, super easy. Yeah, everything was great. And they created it that way. They literally practiced the process. Harry, from your perspective, mate, what was it like? Give me the masculine. Give me the what was the day like? How did the birthing work? Share only obviously what you are happy sharing with and what Liv would be happy you sharing. But just to give me some understanding of okay, am I putting gloves on here? Am I ready for the fight, or am I coming in and breathing, relaxing, and we're going to do this?
Well, so we did. We prepared and went through a few hypnobirthing classes. So practiced, breath work and calming, kind of rehearsed the day a little bit. So we had a rough idea of how we wanted it to go. And in hindsight, the mistake that we made, or the advice from the doula that we had was, go to hospital as late as possible, spend as much time as at home as you can and do that. And we're like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense, I guess. But the detail that you miss there is you also have to get to hospital when she's having contractions in a fuckload of pain. That's not easy. Right? When mobility is not easy and transportation is not easy. And so, we got to the hospital after a few hours of contractions. She was going deep into labor. And then luckily for us, they'd had about 5 other women the same morning come in ready to give birth as well. So they were kind of short-staffed, and, Liv was in this assessment room, and, they're like, oh, is this your first? How, what happened? All that kind of stuff. And apparently, or the assumption that we made is that, a lot of people come in prematurely and they send them home and they do this kind of stuff. And he came in, lives in a lot of pain. And then they finally assessed her and they're like, oh, yep, you can come in, you can have a bed now. And it took them a long time to kind of get into gear. And, we were lucky, we planned for a water birth. So, Liv finally got into the water. And, my job was very much just to support and look after her. The midwives, the nurses, all that kind of stuff were monitoring everything else. My job was just to give her the gas as necessary. She went, other than the gas, was completely natural, to her credit. Just give her some water, all that kind of stuff. And it was interesting, it's hard. And I almost shed a tear a few times seeing Liv in that much pain, and there is nothing I can do about it. Seeing her to this point where she is screaming and literally being torn, and there is nothing I can do about it. And it's not a bad kind of pain, but what it made me think of in hindsight was, I can't imagine what it would be like to have someone die in your arms. For someone that you love to be in a car accident, to be in an accident of some sort, and they're going through that amount of pain, and they're on the way out. The one savior in that space is like, oh, cool, I know she's not going to die. She'd be pretty fucking unlucky in this day and age to die from giving birth. But then the water birth went relatively as planned, and then after that there wasn't too much to it. Like I didn't have to kind of catch him as he kind of came out or anything like that. It was just much a bystander for most of it. Like I think depending on the way that you want to do it, you can be involved as you kind of like. But I guess like the approach that you've taken to, I guess, the start of parenthood, which I really like, I really admire, and I've shifted my way of thinking a little bit, even with where we're at now, is first and foremost being the husband. First and foremost, supporting her and looking after her. And that was the viewpoint that we took even up until now. My job is to look after her and make sure she doesn't die. Her job is to look after him and make sure he doesn't die. And so, with that trickle effect. And so even from the birth, it was like very much that approach, making sure that she's okay. And, like you said, Nick, you don't fucking ask. Ask a woman in labor, hey, do you want this? Do you want to do this? You get a smack in the head pretty damn quick. You hold the juice box up, you hold the gas up, you hold the things up, and they'll take it if they want, but don't say a fucking thing. So, because the more that they have to ask and do all these things, they don't know what they want. And the more it's just going to frustrate them, because then they have to think and come into their logical brain. And you come into your logical brain, you're like, that's painful, that fucking hurts. Especially if you go through a hypnobirth, they've kind of trained you to go more into that trance kind of state and not zone out, but go out of that level of consciousness by you just asking them, how are you feeling? Are you okay? Do you want water? Do you want this? Bringing them back into that becomes a lot more painful, and they're not going to like you for that.
Oh, that's good to know. What now, Nick? How have you chosen to do it?
We're basically doing 3 different births. So the first one was a water birth.
Yeah, in a hospital?
No, it was at a women's practice. We had a pool, water birth, easy peasy. Midwife went a little bit the eastern route with the thing. She started labor at 6 a.m. At I think it was about 8:15. I had a kid pop up. That's it. Done and dusted. It was pretty quick, very easy. He was on my chest. I was there. I supported as much as I could. You don't do anything. You're just there. You're present. You're there in the space. Second one, however, and I think just a little bit of commentary on environment. So first birth, what we didn't get right is it was very intrusive. So we had my mother, her parents, we had close family, friends, people all come to the place. So it wasn't this sacred space. And that put a lot of pressure on. And I mean, you're just so focused on your partner that I didn't even see the fact that there were so many people there. And that was first mistake. So first protect, create a safe environment where your partner feels safe. If you are aware enough, which you should be now. Second birth, we had one in the hospital. Where I did get that part right. So I just told everyone to F off, and she was already under so much pressure, and she allowed the doctors to dictate what she wanted to naturally do. And she needed to be on morphine, and the baby was even resistant. So fun fact, when birth is happening, it's not just mom pushing a baby out. There's an actual dance. There's communication between the baby and the mother, and it comes through as how the body wants to move. The body doesn't want to tear and hurt itself, nor does it want to hurt the baby. And there needs to be constant communication. So if let's say there's a doctor that's maybe enforcing anything on, or someone trying to say, you have to do it this way, or you must push, you need to sometimes step in there and say, listen, allow her to move in what feels intuitively correct. Because that space you're talking about, Harry, that space is a primordial space where women there's a switch and they go into this feral mode where they're hyper protective and their bodies just move as they need to. And that's none of your business, mate. You in that moment are there to facilitate and protect the space. She might not even want you there. So depending on what your situation is. So that's what I would look at doing there. And then that was a very long, labor-intensive process where it shouldn't have been, because it was a very sterile environment and she didn't like that. No one felt, her body didn't feel safe enough to do that. Third time around. So I'm going to be midwife. So we home birthing. Okay. She is fortunately like a viable person to do that. She's never had any complications. And what we have done is ensure that I'm well read, she's well read. We do have assistants on hand, but she wants to be in control of her environment. And again, it's my role to make sure that she feels safe. And she said, look, I might even ask you to like be out of the laboring process, and I will call you when I need you in that space. And that's okay, because it is none of your business. It's such an intimate thing between your partner and your child or children, however many might be popping out in that moment in time. And I think giving her the space to advocate for what she actually wants is super powerful. And not having someone come in and dismiss her intuitive knowing of what actually feels right with her body in those moments. If there's anything that you can do, is do that. You support her with that.
Well, that exactly is what almost created a lot of complications for us. Because they were short-staffed, we didn't have someone on hand the entire time checking as to how far dilated she was and things like that. And Liv was getting really strong contractions and this real urge to push. And they're saying, no, not yet, not yet, not yet. And she's held on for 30, 45 minutes.
Oh.
And then they finally checked and they're like, oh shit, yeah, fucking push. And by the time she was able to push, she was getting so exhausted. And a couple of nurses were coming in at that point, and we could tell that they were getting antsy at getting ready to suggest, some intervention to come and, alleviate the pressure, because Liv was getting so exhausted. And luckily, she was able to push him out without any of those interventions. But she was resisting her natural urge for so long. He would have been born an hour earlier if she'd gone with what her body was telling her.
So this conversation will end up being an entire jab and stab at the westernized system of birthing.
Fuck them.
But seriously, like if you think about it logically, all right, that is like you have some stranger in your most intimate space taking their fingers and checking. What is that going to do? If you're, and I'm going to be very graphic here, if you're trying to take a shit, and someone came in and tried to put their finger in your butt, are you going to carry on taking a shit? No, you're not. You're going to stop. What do you think happens, like, to the body? That's not a safe thing. Like, where in nature do you have, like, monkeys doing that and being like, oh, you just so far dilate? No. You can see it in the person's eyes and in their mannerisms. The entire energy shifts in the space. When a person is going into that space and they're transitioning, she's not there. It is nature taking over her system in that moment. And it's moving this baby through. Your job is to protect and nurture that nature and tell all these other people that think they know what they're doing. That is one of the areas where westernized doctors do not have any skill set, understanding, or notion of what the hell is happening. They panic because all they've done is read in a textbook and you cut if it's been over a certain amount of time, or it's the money component. You need to protect that space and be like, no, dude. Like, if she needs to turn, there's nothing wrong with that. If she needs to do this, there's nothing wrong with that. If she needs to be on her haunches, nothing wrong with that. You don't have to. It's the most unnatural position to give birth, on your back.
Never understood it.
Yeah.
I always
It
ask,
doesn't make
what
sense.
nature do?
Yeah. Well, and they had the audacity to say, oh, we're going to need to get you out of the bath so we can measure you to see how far dilated you are, when she's in that much pain in that position. And that was one thing that we learned a lot about, even through doing the hypnobirthing stuff. So for a lot of people, if you're going through that, I would highly recommend at least educating yourself in that space. Whether you go through with that approach or not, totally up to you. But the amount of stuff that we learned that empowered us with that decision making and having that plan going into the birthing was super helpful, because like you said, they want to intervene so that they can control everything, that makes it easy for them, so that they can finish their shift on time, so they can do all these kind of things. But being able to ask the right questions, know the potential complications or the potential risks that come with some of those interventions and all those kind of things, when most of the time, like, what is the risk of the baby, of the mother's health at this stage? Nature knows what it's doing.
So this is one of the discussions when I was talking to our midwife, we obviously found someone that we really align with. And I was like, this is the one thing I'm worried about. She's like, don't worry. I deal with that shit all the time. Because I don't know where the line is, right? I'm like, fuck, maybe something is going wrong. And I've got a guy in a white coat here. He looks pretty fucking serious. And he's telling me that. I'm like, maybe he's right. He's done this more times than me. And I was like, this is the embodiment of the king, lover, magician, warrior. I was like, something pretty fucking magic happening here. Warrior, you got to protect that space pretty damn bad. Same with the king. The lover's got to be there for the support. But I'm like, I know in myself that there is a weakness for authority. It's been bred into me, right? So I know a guy walking in a white coat, pen in pocket, going, all right, guys, straight to surgery. We got to roll. It's like, what? Fuck, maybe he's right, So I made sure that weakness of mine was covered. I'm like, midwife, had the chat. I'm like, this is where I'm going to struggle. How do you guys deal with this? She's like, we deal with that shit all the time. You tell us how you want it planned, and we will stick to that plan as well as we want until we know that, yeah, okay, there are complications now. We do need to intervene. And that's one of the things I've been most happy with. I'm fucking excited about it.
100%.
Do you guys make me excited?
I'm the exact same. If the doctor's like, oh, I've changed now, but in the moment, it can be very hard. You've got this doctor, this dude that's, studied all these years telling you, hey, we need to do this. And at the moment, you're like, well, we got to act fast. I don't fucking know. This is my first time being here. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know all that kind of stuff. But having, for us, we had the doula, which knew our plan, and she was communicating with the midwives, the nurses, like all that kind of stuff, because she knew the way that we wanted things to run. So I didn't have to worry about talking to them. I didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. I could just look after Liv. And it was only, which it didn't get to this point, but if it got to a point where, like, oh shit, stuff is serious right now, like we need you to make a decision, then, I would be consulted. But luckily it never got to that, because she was looking after everything and I could just be there for everything that Liv needed.
Cool. Look, for those guys listening, thank you so much for listening. We're going to do a part 2 of this for the kid side of things, the communication, the building a family. How do you communicate with the kids? Not this new age millennial stuff where, you just let them do as they please continuously for the rest of their life. We're going to actually give some skills and tools that you can use to help build a healthy, happy family, both with your relationship and your kids. Now, if this has been helpful for you and you feel there's someone else out there that this will be helpful for, please share it. Please write a review. We do this to obviously help ourselves. This has been a really, really positive experience for me going into this mode of parenthood, but also to help out thousands of other men who listen to this. And the wider we share this, we feel the better and more impact we can make. So thank you very much, Harry and Nick, for sharing what is often not a journey shared at all. It's been phenomenal for me. I'll be absolutely honest. It's been really helpful. Thank you.